Hi everyone, welcome to the Unhandled Exception podcast. My name's Dan Clark and this is the third episode. So I'm super excited to be joined by Steve Gordon today, Microsoft MVP, Pluralsight author, international speaker, blogger, user group organizer. I'm actually getting exhausted just thinking about all this stuff. So a massive welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great to be one of the first few guests and see how this podcast goes. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. I believe massive congratulations are in order too with your new job next week.
Yeah, that's it. The final week before I enter the world of working for Elastic, joining them there as a senior engineer on the client's team. So that would be maintaining Elasticsearch.net and Nest and some of the other work that they're doing kind of on the .NET libraries there.
Wow, exciting times. You're certainly going to be missed by Mugex. I remember, when was it? It was a couple of years ago now. I came down to visit your user group .NET Southeast, and you had Richard Campbell, which was quite surreal. Actually meeting Campbell in flesh, but it did the all-day hackathon, and then Richard Campbell did his history of .NET talk in the evening. So that was really good fun. But that was obviously in the Mugex offices. Is the Already project, and I've forgotten the name of the
Humanitarian Toolbox, yeah.
Yeah, is that still going? Is that something you're still involved with?
Yeah, so Humanitarian Toolbox, the charity is kind of still there. And I actually saw that they have kicked off a kind of a second project or another project around sort of a JavaScript thing that's similar to the Already concept, I think, but maybe a little bit more generalized. So the Already project was very much guided by some requirements that were coming from sort of disaster relief organizations. And unfortunately, they kind of drifted away from the project. So at the moment, it's kind of, it's not dead, but it's parked for the last year, I think, just kind of waiting until there's another organization that could kind of guide us on what it would need to do. Because we could keep building the thing and just making up stories and making up features. But unless you've got a real user and someone that understands that kind of domain of kind of disaster relief, it's quite hard to decide where to take it, what it should do and how it should work, that kind of thing. But hopefully it will pick up again one day.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, the work that went into that it's now just sitting there. I find that with a lot of things. I was just talking to my wife earlier. My previous contract went under because of COVID, and a lot of work went into that. It was around DNA sequencing, that kind of thing. And then the company had to close down because of COVID. Just like that, all the work that had gone into it.
So sad, yeah.
It's sometimes sad how a lot of work goes into these things that could really benefit humanity, and then it gets thrown away. Very sad, very sad.
Yeah, I think it's something I know they're keen to kind of find someone. So if there's anyone out there that works for a kind of disaster relief or humanitarian charities that wants to kind of see what Humanitarian Toolbox can help build for them, or if they've got apps that need porting or maintaining, that's very much kind of the goal of that sort of charity organization, which is put them in the open, have them somewhere where that they can kind of be continually maintained. Because I think a lot of these organizations tend to get kind of, they'll have a drive to build like an app to do one very specific thing, like as a disaster is occurring, and people will dive on board and help. But then, that disaster kind of gets resolved and the app kind of just gets parked somewhere, and then they forget who worked on it. And next time that same type of situation occurs, they haven't got the knowledge or the expertise to really get that thing fired back up again. So that's kind of the idea behind the HT box, is to put that with the experts that can kind of look after that stuff. They've got a ton of Azure credits as well, so they can kind of host these things potentially for the organizations, and then the organizations can do what they're good at, which is disaster relief, and have contributors and people coming in to kind of provide code and maintenance as it's needed.
I think that's always the thing about when you work on a project and it goes live, that's not the end of the project. So you've still got to have people that can know that code and work on it and make changes.
That's it. And it's not always the fun part as well. People are very excited about building a feature and shipping a thing, but then, dealing with bug requests or, investigating weird little sort of edge case issues and things is something that everyone likes to do. They just want to build the next cool thing. So having it out there somewhere where people can kind of keep these things maintained is a very good idea, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I know you've done a ton of talks on things like performance in .NET, dependency injection, and various other things. But I thought we can certainly delve into those a bit later. But one of the things you do a lot of is you're a Pluralsight author.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be quite interesting to delve into that. I'm not sure how much stuff you can talk about, like what the audition process was, what's involved with creating a course, but I thought that'd be quite an interesting topic to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can sort of talk about it fairly generally. In terms of auditioning, so I approached them with a sort of just a general query at one stage to see, what do they require from an author, that kind of thing. And they set you up with a call with someone that's kind of an acquisition person to kind of bring new authors into the platform. They want to talk through what sort of stuff you can, provide in terms of content, and give you a bit of a feel for what it looks like to be an author in terms of, what the deliverables are and how contracts work, that kind of thing. And then once you've done that, you're generally asked to do an audition video. So I think that had to be about 10 minutes roughly. And what you're meant to do in that 10 minutes is put together an actual, small course basically. So you need to have a goal, what you're going to actually teach someone, and you need to take them from beginning to end in that sort of 10-minute period. They give you access to the Pluralsight PowerPoint slide deck and things like that, so that you can kind of get a feel for working with that. And it's not about being perfect at this stage, but it's just them getting a feel for, how do you go about teaching? What is your style? Are you able to work with the tools that you need to work with? And then for my particular case, it then was quite a long waiting period. I think Pluralsight was very busy at the time with a bunch of work they were doing with Microsoft. So all of the kind of acquisition people got pulled off onto other work, and it was sort of twiddling my thumbs, waiting to see, do they like it? Is it any good? That kind of thing. But eventually, a few months later, I think we sort of got back in touch again, and they sort of said, yeah, the audition was great. We're happy with this. And then you sort of get brought in as an author at that stage into the actual platform, and they give you access to things like a set of tools that you use for authoring. So that's slide decks, but also all of the things like the icon packs and stuff that you're going to use in slides. And then the process moves on to, actually pitching a course or picking a course from the list that they've got available. So you work with someone that's called an author success manager, which sounds really, really cool to have your own sort of internal agent at Pluralsight. And their job really is to, to deal with all of your kind of day-to-day stuff of any questions you have, any concerns you have, ideas you have, get them pushed through to the curriculum people, that kind of thing. And if you have an idea that they like, if it fits into the platform, or there's a course that you feel that you can provide that they're sort of looking for authors to do, then you can kind of get into the actual process and hopefully get signed to do one of those courses. And then that's where the work really begins. It's also a little bit competitive. You need to, if you have an idea, you kind of need to get it done. Otherwise, if someone else covers it, then they kind of own that topic essentially for a period of time at least.
Yeah, especially when a new technology comes in, you've probably got to race to be the owner of that area.
Yeah, I think I'm sure there must have been, people suggesting Blazor stuff like about a year or so ago, and I kind of kept well out of that one. Let the people that are using it. I like to do the courses on the things that I have. Like, I learn a lot doing them. Because like you say, you do a bunch of background research, and you start sort of saying, "Oh, I want to talk about iLogger, but then I need to understand what it's doing behind the scenes to be able to explain how it works or why it works the way it does." But I start with something that I kind of know pretty solidly, like the DI course was the first one, and I was so glad it hadn't already been kind of covered, because it was something I could easily figure out how to produce a course on that topic. And then but then you start pushing at the edges of your own knowledge, and you're like, okay, now I have to go and look up this, and I have to do that. I think that's where a good chunk of the time goes, is research, building you build the demos, but then you want to verify that what you've done is the right way of doing it or the best way of doing it, because you're under a bit more pressure to get the best code you can, because people are going to copy paste the code, even though it's a demo. So try and get it right. A few times, I think last time it's quite interesting with the worker services one. I actually so I know obviously through MVP stuff, I know Glenn and people at Microsoft, and I pinged them an email. I said, I've done this thing, and I'm not sure if this is the right way to do the thing. and it was around running the worker service on Linux. And I'd kind of got it working, but I said, this bit seems a little bit shaky. And they looked at it and they're like, yeah, it is shaky, but that's how you do it. It's just we need to make that a bit better in the tooling. And it was interesting to see the kind of feedback loop where they said, actually, yeah, we're going to take that away as an item now that we need to figure out how we, make that better in the product as well. So I think that's where the MVP program is really beneficial for both ways, isn't it? It's like we get the access to people, but they get to see us kind of trying things out and then going, I don't know how to do this, or if I've done it, I don't know if I've done it nicely. And then they kind of go and make things better.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess while still valuable, they must get a lot of that with it being open source now.
Yeah.
So like it's completely out in the open. So they're getting so much initial feedback from developers that are interested and willing to look through that code and try out the cutting edge.
I don't know how they manage it, actually, to be honest. With you look at the number of issues that go into like the runtime or into the ASP.NET repository, and it's I don't know how they kind of get that stuff distilled down to the actual problems. And because there's obviously a lot of beginners coming in that are just not sure how to do something, and that's not a bug. But then it's also maybe a sign that the docs aren't good enough, or the docs weren't easy enough to find, or whatever it was that meant that person didn't know how to do something. But I don't know how they filter that down to these are the actual bugs that we have to fix between the beta releases and things. I guess I'm going to learn some of that myself soon with the Elastic stuff because that's all open. So get to figure that out myself now. It's one of the things that kind of drew me to the job because I wasn't, I was very, very happy at Magix and I wasn't looking for jobs. I wasn't planning to apply anywhere. I had a stable job doing stuff I liked, building things I liked, had fed into my blogging and things because I was learning a lot as I went as well. But Martin, who runs the clients team at Elastic, pinged me and said, have you seen this job opening we've got? And most of the time I get that stuff from recruiters and I kind of just push it to the side on LinkedIn or whatever. But because it was coming from Martin, who I knew, I was like, okay, I'll have a look at the opening. Had a look and I was like, this sounds quite interesting. Maintain and own the .NET client. Because I've been doing that kind of stuff as a bit of a hobby with I've been rebuilding bits of the AWS SDK just to see how I could do it more efficiently. So I was like, that's kind of what I want to do. And then he said, and there's a bit of DevRel and there's a bit of we need you to write some docs probably and blog posts about how this stuff works. I'm like, okay. It's basically got all of the elements of what I like to do day to day. So yeah.
That does sound like it's got your name written all over it, to be honest.
I think certainly Martin sort of said, it feels like it would be up your street. And when I looked at it, I was like talking it through with Rhiannon and sort of saying, do I want to move on from a job that I'm happy in to a job that sounds good, but you never know with these things, will it be as good as it sounds, that kind of thing. But I must admit the interview process and chatting to everyone really put my mind at ease, really. I had 4 kind of interview type sessions, I guess. One with a kind of internal recruiter and then with the actual people on the team and stuff. And the more I talked to people and I found out what I'd be able to do, and basically they sort of said it's, you need to deliver the .NET client. It's kind of up to you what direction you take it in. Technically, if you could justify it, you could rewrite the entire thing from scratch. You can do what you want kind of thing to make this thing the best it can be. So obviously I'm not going to go and rewrite the Nest client, but I think it'll be fun to go and get a look at how you sort of. Well, I watched the .NET design reviews on YouTube, which is a really geeky, boring thing for most people to do, but I find it really interesting watching them design .NET basically and figure out all of the if we make this thing public, what should the properties look like and what should the parameters for constructor be. I kind of find that stuff quite interesting. So I'm hoping I can take that passion over and, plant it on that. And I think it'd be a whole different bunch of things for me to talk about and write about as well.
I guess if you're paying attention to the .NET design kind of stuff, you know what's coming. So you can think ahead of the curve at Elastic and plan ahead because you know what's coming in the way they're doing stuff with future versions.
That's it, I think so. And I've already, actually during the interview, I thought, it'd be a good idea if I looked at their code. So I pulled down the Elastic library and I was playing around with it. And then I found an area where I could did 2 PRs with performance optimizations that they were keen to take. It's like, that's a good sign. So I've already been able to contribute something that they needed. So that means that at least I know I'll be able to do stuff when I join them. But once I'd done that, I found an area in the .NET runtime that didn't have an API that I wanted. So I've now put in an API proposal to the .NET runtime to suggest that particular API be added. So it'd be interesting to see the process of that as well. And if they like the proposal, then I may even see about doing the implementation for it if possible. And that'll be my first proper PR to .NET runtime.
Wow, that'd be amazing.
So far, I've done sort of documentation and stuff, so it'd be nice to do an actual piece of code.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to Pluralsight, I keep on seeing screenshots on Twitter showing Excel spreadsheets of your progress. It certainly seems extremely organized. So how many courses have you done now? Every time I turn around, you seem to be on your next one.
Yeah. So the one I'm working on this week, actually, I've just pretty much finished all the stuff today, is number 5. So that'll be released fairly soon, hopefully. So I think it's probably been a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years since I probably started with them now. Time seems to have flown by. So at the moment, they usually kind of estimate around 3 months for a course. And that's obviously a bit flexible around your other commitments and things like that. But that's kind of the time frame that you're looking for a regular course these days. And yeah, that spreadsheet is my kind of keep me motivated, keep me on track, and keep me organized. Although, despite what it might look like from those pictures, I am a natural procrastinator if given the opportunity. So I find that having a spreadsheet that kind of tells me all of the things I need to do in the order I need to do them is a great way for me to kind of see that I'm progressing, and also make sure that I'm aware that there's a lot left to do, so I don't just kind of keep putting it off until the last minute, that kind of thing. And I found that quite a useful tool, particularly with working full time. I'm doing Pluralsight kind of around the day job, so typically my day would look like get up quite early. Some people, get scared when I say I get up about 5:30 in the morning, and then I'll do typically a couple of hours on Pluralsight work before switching over to kind of day job mode. And when you're doing bits and pieces like that, when you're only getting those kind of 1.5, 2 hour windows to do a piece of work, it can be quite easy to lose track and lose your thread. So having that spreadsheet is also a kind of good idea for me. So I know, okay, I'm picking it back up again, and this is where I got to, and this is the work that needs to be done next, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I do similar. Part of the reason I get up so early is because the kids wake me up early, but they do actually get bits of stuff done in the morning, like .NET Oxford and things, because, just like you, full-time job. But then you also run .NET South East as well. How are you finding that going since the lockdown?
Yeah, it's definitely been a bit tough. I think, I think we're missing the in-person element of it definitely now. I think we've been able to switch over to online, and we've done probably a few meetings now over Zoom. The last one we just did, actually, we did with the Microsoft Docs team, and so they hosted us on their Twitch channel, which was kind of fun. But I'm personally missing the interaction side of it. The first half hour to 45 minutes when people start arriving, normally we'd have a chat in the reception area, we have a beer, and you just kind of get to find out what people are working on, what kind of things they're struggling with, or what they've learned, what cool tools they've got, that kind of stuff, which, although we're trying to keep that going over Zoom, I think it just naturally is a bit harder when you have 40 plus people on a Zoom call for everyone to contribute and splinter off into groups of, talking about different things. You can really only have one thread going over a Zoom call during the sort of intro stuff. So, but it seems to be going well. I think one of the advantages for people generally is that now the locality of the meetup is no longer a sort of barrier to them coming along. So, people that maybe couldn't come, even if they were in the Brighton area, which is where we host it, they might not be able to come along because they've got commitments looking after children, or they finish work too late and they can't actually get in time. And so I think having it online does help in that respect. People are kind of more easily able to just kind of put it on in the background at a minimum, and kind of listen in. We try and record some of the sessions as well, so people can kind of catch up afterwards. But I guess it then starts to spoil people for choice as well, because you've got, I think there's at least kind of 10 or so regularly active .NET meetups in the UK alone. And with all of those going on, you could probably spend most of your month in the evenings just joining those calls and things. And then if you add in the US as well, it starts to explode.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of which, I owe you and Shahid a massive thank you from MK.NET, because you're doing a talk on, well, it was the 17th, but now it's the 18th, And I'll
Yeah.
definitely include a link to this in the show notes. But that was going to be on the 17th, but there was a bit of a clash with .NET Oxford, which was on that night, and both you and Shahid very, very kindly agreed to change it to the next day. So a big thank you to both of you.
No problem.
For all the listeners, check out the show notes, check out miltonkeynes.net, and go and listen to Steve's talk, which I believe is on the autonomy of ASP.NET core requests.
Yeah, anatomy of requests. So this was a sort of talk that's been bubbling in the back of my mind for a while, and I finally got to present it for the first time at NDC Oslo. Although unfortunately, my first acceptance to NDC Oslo, and then I presented it from my bedroom and didn't get to fly over there and kind of enjoy the conference. But and the basic idea is just looking at what happens when a request flows from like a browser request, and then how that gets into ASP.NET Core and all of the kind of internal components there that are dealing with that request. And it's quite interesting because then you can start to show people, okay, well, here's all of the areas that you can provide your own implementation of things, and you can customize behaviors and start doing some more advanced stuff for kind of reuse of code. So it seems to be quite popular with people at the moment. So I think this will be the third or fourth time that I've presented it.
I'll have to see on the 18th if I can get a second consecutive night off from the wife.
Yeah.
That sounds really interesting. I'd like to come along to that one. Have we got time to talk a bit about performance? Because that's one of the other topics you talk a lot about.
Yeah.
I think you actually came up on July last year, I think, to .NET Oxford when meetups were in person.
Yeah.
Talk all about performance. So that was a really, really interesting talk.
Yeah, I think I gave the 1.5 hour Uber version of that high performance talk.
Yes. One thing that does jump out at me when I was listening to the talk was it feels like there's a massive balancing act between readability and these performance changes. How do you tend to find the best way of choosing between that readability and like really eking out the last bit of performance? Some of the code I've seen where it's really been written for performance, I would have been terrified to touch ever again. So it feels like there's quite a big trade-off there.
Yeah, definitely there is. Actually, I had a quite interesting chat with Derek Comartin last night, who was your first guest. Did a session with him last night, which will be going onto his YouTube channel that touches on some of this stuff. But yeah, it is definitely a trade-off. So the examples that I show in the talk kind of take some relatively standard type activities like parsing a file and writing results out to something else. And then take a look at what it takes to make that sort of high performance. And what we really mean by high performance is probably allocating less memory and hopefully working faster, so executing more quickly. And as you move more towards the performant end, the code bloats a bit because some of the convenience APIs that you were just doing a single line of code, suddenly you're optimizing and now you're responsible for all of the sort of buffer management or something that you're doing without parsing. So one line can become 10 lines, that kind of thing. And I really urge people, while it's very exciting to work on the high performance stuff, you have to really have a good reason for it. Are you building something that you can genuinely prove there's a business benefit from it operating quicker or with less memory? And I think that justification is getting a little easier with containers, because if you can reduce the memory footprint of one instance of one microservice, and then scale that out, you can find that you could dramatically reduce the compute power that you need, or the size of the VMs with memory underneath that service, and start to save yourself some money. So that's where I got into it, was looking at some of our sort of crazy busy services that were producing processing queue messages. We had like 17 million of the messages a day. And at that kind of scale, optimizing the code meant we could sort of half the time it took and half the memory usage of that particular service. But yeah, the maintainability aspect then is the challenge. And we have had code where I've had, as part of my handover when I started to move on from Ajax, I was sort of taking people through the code. And there were a couple of scared looks at some of the areas of code because it was, complex. It used that span of T type, and it was sort of managing sort of buffers of memory and slicing through them and that kind of thing. And the point I made to the people was, hopefully you should never need to touch this code. The reason we chose to optimize it is it's a microservice. It's designed to do a particular job, which it does. All of the bugs have been kind of sort of knocked out of it. And it's not something that's evolving daily or weekly or even monthly. And so in that particular case, you don't have to worry so much about the maintenance overhead. But if someone were looking to do this on their existing monolith, on an area of the code that's used, touched, fairly often as new features come in, then I would urge them to consider the, maintenance is probably more important there, and the code needs to be clear and easy to sort of read and understand. Because if you're given a 40-line method or 40 lines of code that's high performance, just understanding it and grokking it can be really, really painful to begin with. So you don't want to do that on stuff that's changing all the time.
Yeah, I guess it's about isolating that code as well. So if you've got a function which is pages long, and you've got one bit within that function which has been highly performance tuned, and the rest doesn't need to be. But if that was separate and on its own, that one class which is somewhere else, or even one service which is somewhere else, as you say, doesn't need to change. It's all about the single responsibility principle and keeping that on its own, so the business logic can change, or other code can change around it.
Yeah, you generally want to put, kind of an abstraction there around where you're writing the higher performance code, so that you can swap out that implementation if you need to. We had areas of code where we actually decided to switch back to a slightly less optimized code, because then we realized we were changing it more than we thought we were going to. So we took out some of the span of T stuff and went back to a regular string builder. And that was easy to do because, as you say, it was all kind of behind its own sensible class with a sort of a nicely named method, and you just swap the implementation to the slightly less optimized one, but the easier to maintain one. And that's pretty trivial if you design it that way.
I've not found span of T that bad. I think it's some of the other, when you start trying to eke out even more performance gains, it becomes like more difficult to read. But a span of T seems quite readable. But I guess I'm kind of used to C and C++ using pointers and stuff, so maybe it's easier to read for someone with that background.
Yeah, I think your background would definitely help. If you've got sort of new junior devs on the team that have come through university and have never really done that stuff necessarily, and had the experience of working at the lower level, if you've only ever really seen C# as your sort of main language, then it does so much of it for you. It does the memory management. You don't generally have to think about it. And so suddenly, if you're thrown a piece of code where you now do have to make decisions like that, it can be a little bit more tough.
Yeah, definitely. I would not like to go back to the C and C++ days. I'm sure it's moved on a lot since I was working on that, but as you say, .NET does so much for you. It just feels like super productive. But maybe where you dig into the performance side, I've certainly not done it to that level at all. So I probably use some of the .NET functionality without fully understanding some of the performance things. Well, hopefully my code is not too bad. I'm guessing that's quite common as well.
One of the key things is that .NET itself is getting faster in terms of the framework and the runtime. So a lot of devs don't necessarily have to worry about this stuff. It's certainly more of a niche area of particular scenarios that you might have where you want to do it. Sometimes just by upgrading from .NET 2.1 or .NET Core 2.1 to 3.1, you'll get a performance gain for free, just because they've done a bunch of work on all of the APIs that you're using day to day.
I keep on seeing on Twitter graphs of .NET performance, and I think the most recent one was on gRPC, where they were showing how fast it was in .NET, and it is so impressive that the performance work they're doing in .NET.
Yeah, I think the team have definitely had that as one of their sort of goals. I think to try and make this stuff work more quickly for free. And like you say, the gRPC one was, I think they're now second fastest for gRPC client server stuff, which is pretty impressive given that only released really with the 3.1 timeframe, and we're a year or so on, and they've managed to get that much performance out of it.
Yeah, definitely. Did you mention earlier that you're up for doing a dev tip?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So mine isn't like a link or anything that you can necessarily go to, but my dev tip that I give to people is don't be afraid to just spend some time learning stuff, and not worry about having to necessarily deliver something. You need to agree this with your company, of course, but there's so much out there in terms of free content, blogs, YouTube videos, things like that. And then if you've got access to things like Pluralsight, spend a bit of time just kind of absorbing some of that, as well as kind of just bashing out code, because it really will help you kind of find out how are other people tackling problems, and give you different ways of approaching those things. I think having a tool set is really important, and knowing more than one way of solving a problem can be really useful at times.
That's one reason why I like podcasts so much. I find that listen to podcasts, you get a broad range of what there is out there, and then things you're interested in, you can then dig a bit deeper.
Absolutely, yeah.
So my dev tip is, and this is a tip for people that use Git, which is most people. I find a lot of developers that use Git and they think, I don't need to understand rebasing. And it always surprises me when I hear this because it's so insanely powerful and it's much simpler than it sounds. It's kind of as with most things, it's only complicated till you understand it. And I see a lot of developers doing something which I call the erroneous merge commit. And I wrote a blog post a few years ago, which I'll link to in the show notes, but it's where you've got a branch divergence locally and you make a merge commit and the developer pushes that commit. So, and this can happen even on the same branch. So for example, if you've got a main branch, you can have a divergence between main and origin/main, and that's a local divergence only. And a lot of developers who don't understand rebasing would, rather than rebasing that before pushing it to everyone else, that divergence and merge commit, they would just push it out. And then it makes the history really horrible. And it's just, rebasing sounds complicated, but it's actually, once you understand it, it's really simple and insanely powerful. So that's my dev tip. I'll include a link to that old blog post of a couple of years ago in the show notes. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think we've covered some good stuff there. Yeah, I think one thing we did sort of, when we sort of were throwing around ideas of what we could cover, was we touched on sort of blogging, and I know you do a lot of blogging and I do a lot of blogging. And it's something that came to mind just because someone actually asked me a question over LinkedIn yesterday. They were sort of saying, they wanted to get started in blogging and they were unsure about how to go about it. And they were like, there's so much stuff out there, I don't know how to compete with it. And they were just generally, I think, a bit worried about doing it. They could sort of see the benefits, but they were just kind of scared to start actually doing it. And the thing I was saying as my response, and I should probably put this together into more of an updated sort of blog post, but I've got some blog posts on this kind of topic. It's, you're not trying to compete with other blog posts. You're just presenting, what you've learned. And if you present it that way, people they can say, here, have you looked at this, or have you tried this instead in the comments? But ultimately, it's hard for someone to the internet can be a bit of a mean place, unfortunately, but it's hard for people to be reasonably mean if you're just presenting what you've learned and what the problem was you were trying to solve. Here's how we solved it. Here's the problems we ran into while we were doing it. Here's what we found that didn't work even, can be really valuable. The number of times I've read a blog post from someone that's kind of like, we did this and then it went horribly wrong. It saves me making that mistake for myself. So I really appreciate those kind of things being put out there. So it took me a while to get regular at blogging. I think over the last 15 years, I've probably tried blogging properly like 3 or 4 times. And it's only this last attempt where it's stuck for like 3-4 years now. And I'm actually able to put regular stuff out there and kind of, put stuff out that people seem to want to read.
Yeah, I've found that quite often by planning to write a blog post, I learn that topic a lot more deeper as well, because I want to make sure things are right. I do more reading on it. And just from a, not a selfish point of view, but just from a self-improvement point of view, I'm actually benefiting as well through blogging and sharing that knowledge, because it makes me understand something deeper. Because I've articulated it and written it down, then I'm more likely to remember that for a much longer period of time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've kind of hit on two big benefits that I get from it, really. I mean, I've gone back and Googled my own blog posts to find stuff as well that I've written in the past, because I know I've written about it 3 or 4 years ago, but I can't quite remember how to do something, and there it is written down for me in a form that's kind of very clear, because I had to make it clear for other people to understand it. And like you say, any form of teaching, it really reinforces it in your own learning as well.
Yeah, I've quite often Googled your blog post too. So
I know where some of the traffic's coming from then.
Fantastic. So what have you got next in the pipeline? I know you've got an exciting new job at Elastic.
Yep.
And knowing you, probably more Pluralsight courses.
Yeah, I think that will probably let myself settle in at the job for a good few weeks. There'll be lots to learn over there at Elastic. to kind of get my head around. I've got an idea for another Pluralsight course actually that I have been chatting about with my Office Success Manager as it stands. So we are sort of getting towards seeing if that's something that the team would want there. So that might be something I kick off towards the end of the year, hopefully. I've got a load of backlog of blogs I've got to write, load of content that I want to put out on that. And I'd like to try and get a bit more time for some more YouTube videos as well, because I'm sort of quite keen about putting stuff out that's free, as well as the Pluralsight stuff that's obviously behind a paid subscription. Put out some stuff maybe that's a bit more sort of beginner friendly content, and maybe even doing some then more advanced stuff to sort of complement it, of say, here's a topic, here's how you get started with it, and then here's how it actually works behind the scenes, that kind of stuff. See if that's stuff that people are interested in. So yeah, I won't be getting too much sleep for a while, I imagine.
Well, you seem to have quite a good routine going on with your 5:30 get up and getting stuff done beforehand.
Yeah, I find I'm sort of a morning person these days. I didn't used to be, but as I've kind of trained my body, I mean, it's going to be a bit of a hit because I've had sort of 2 weeks gap between my old job and my new job. So the alarm's been going off at 7:30, and I've kind of got into that routine again now. So I'm going to have a bit of a rude awakening when I get going over the next few weeks.
Well, I find because my wife likes to go to bed quite early, and so I go to bed at the same time. So I naturally wake up early, but she likes her lines too. So it just means that time in the morning when I get up is perfect, because even though the kids do get up quite early, they kind of, I'm quite lucky really, they entertain themselves. So they know that first thing in the morning, Daddy likes his coffee, because I only have one a day. So that's special time. That's my coffee. That's where Daddy gets stuff done. Yeah. So the morning is quite a special productive time, I think, for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, people sort of often ask, how do you do so much, or how do you remain productive? And I think it's I look at people like Scott Hanselman and I see the amount of stuff he puts out as well, and I'm always like marveling at how much he gets done. And then I sort of remind myself, well, actually, he's doing much the same as we are. Really, he's found a time or a set of times sort of during the week that work for him to get stuff done, and he's put a routine around it. So, I know he puts out a weekly podcast, and he puts out, blog posts, and he's doing a lot of YouTube videos at the moment. Plus he works full time at Microsoft, which is, surely quite a busy job as well. And I think it's just finding that balance. And if you do want to achieve something like getting started with blogging, or if you want to look at, publishing to Pluralsight or YouTube or whatever that might be, just try and carve out that regular window, and you'll be surprised how much an hour or two a day can really add up over a working week. And just make sure you've just got enough time for family and recharge as well. So I try and leave the weekends clearer than I used to now, so that there's a bit more time for me and my wife to kind of go out for walks and things. It's lockdown at the moment has kind of kicked us back into, well, we've not got much to do outside of the house, so there'll be more time probably for coding and things to fill the gaps. But I think that's key. If you want to be productive, it's just have a routine around it.
I think also a lot of people don't realize how much time they spend watching television. So that's a very one-way thing, where in the evenings, like Anna and I we tend to get into TV episode kind of things, and would watch an episode a night, but we don't watch hours of it. And I think that's a lot of time you can gain back. It's different for everyone. It depends on priorities. And if you want to create content or do this kind of thing, just prioritize it. I think that's the key thing.
That's it. Yeah, I think it's everyone has their own preference for a hobby. Some people might want to play a musical instrument or learn another language or watch TV, watch movies. And I do bits of that myself. But like you say, it's, for me, I really enjoy as a hobby, not just as my kind of day to day. I enjoy the process of blogging about a topic. If I do something at work and I kind of want to know a little bit more detail and I want to kind of understand it better, I find that if I dedicate a few hours to putting that down in written form, like you say, researching it, you learn more about the kind of the surrounding topic as well. That really then sort of starts to come together. And that's, if you want to spend your time that way, you just need to make sure you do carve the time out to do it. Pick something that you're less interested in and try and swap it out for that.
So we're going to take a short break now for a word from our sponsors, Everstack. This is my company and we do software development and consultation services focusing on .NET and Azure. For more information, visit our website at everstack.com. So during the main conversation with Steve, after we finished the main content, we then started chatting about podcasts, audio editing, microphones, public speaking, and a few other things. We hadn't stopped recording and thought that it might be interesting to include this conversation in this episode too. So if you have made it this far and our many tangents in topics hasn't put you off, then carry on listening. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do remember to rate it in your favourite podcast app. And you can also leave comments for each episode on the website unhandledexceptionpodcast.com. One thing that I'm quite keen on this podcast is for it to be conversational rather than a talk.
Yeah, it's quite nice to kind of meander in and out of stuff, isn't it? And
it was interesting when I did the one with Derek, because we did it over 2 recordings and we talked about like so many different things, not planned at all. So it just like the conversation just went in so many different directions.
Yeah.
And over 2 recordings, so there was overlap over the 2 recordings. So it was really the editing was trying to jigsaw the different bits in. So I'm quite enjoying the editing though. I started off with Audacity, but now because I've recently subscribed to Adobe All Apps plans.
Oh yeah.
So I've got Adobe Audition as well. So I'm playing with that, which seems really good.
Yeah, I've found that a lot because I started with Audition and I've very quickly decided, having had played with Audacity to begin with, and then went on to Audition. Audition, I found a lot sort of, I don't know, I could be a bit more productive in it. I guess it's, they've probably thrown quite a lot more people at it from a UI perspective, so it's a bit clearer what you're doing. And then more recently, I've been using another software for the kind of processing of the audio now as well. So my Pluralsight like editing time is massively, I think I've halved it probably from where I started. Like you say, it's kind of an iterative thing. You learn more and more about it. I've got a set of presets now for, like, as long as I set the room up in the same way, I know that I can just run it for a preset bank to kind of clean it up a little bit, get rid of a bit of background noise and reverb and that kind of stuff. And then I've got pretty clear audio, and then it's just cutting out my gaffes and mistakes and rephrasings and things as I go.
Do you still do all the like pillows around everything?
Yeah, at the moment, I'm probably going to get a couple of those sound panels. I think the battle I've got is Rhiannon's not super keen on me turning the office into a complete like audio recording room. It's I don't want to put anything permanent up on the wall. So at least with the pillows, for now, I record a module in one go for Pluralsight in terms of the audio. So I only have to do it 2 or 3 times over the course of the 3 months, and it doesn't take too long just to whack a few pillows up on the wall. But I'd like to get to the point, maybe if I could get sound panels and get them on some of those kind of like those screwless hooks that you can put on the wall, maybe, or something along those lines. See if that works to hold them up.
Yeah, so I've just invested in a new microphone. I did have the Blue Yeti X, which is a condenser microphone, but now I've purchased the Rode Procaster because I found that the Blue Yeti picked up everything, including lots of background noise, kids upstairs running around, echo in the room, whereas the Procaster is a dynamic mic, so that picks up a lot less noise.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good coming over. I mean, it's only coming over web, but it sounds pretty good at the moment.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, because I've not properly had a chance to play with it, so I'm hoping it sounds quite good. A condenser mic's active, where a dynamic mic is passive, and it's meant to. You've got to get much closer to it.
Yeah.
If I start walking away, it's like a very small cone. So I'm hoping that this will mean that I don't need to get all the padding around the room, because like yourself, I don't really want to turn this into a studio and start putting carpet all over the walls and things.
Yeah, no, I think we could. Yeah, if it works out well for you, I'd be quite interested actually, because I wouldn't mind trying another. I'd like to kind of borrow/rent one from somewhere and see like how much difference. Because like you say, I think the problem I have with this condenser version is that I am getting like the back echo off the wall behind me subtly. I've got carpeting, we've got curtains I pull across when I do Pluralsight stuff, but there's not enough soft furnishings in here really to kind of stop all of those little sounds coming in.
Yeah, because it's also, because it's thin, then it's not getting in the way of my monitors or anything. It's even
Yeah.
though it's coming right in my face, I can just work and not even notice it because I pair program all day long at work.
Right.
So we're talking all day long. So with this having to be closer to my face because it's dynamic, it's not been an issue at all, really.
Mm. Yeah, that's the problem I have with this one. So, like, I can't see the entire screen behind that one. I can see this second screen, but so I always have to shift it up high if I'm actually on a video call, and I think that echoes a bit more then because I'm much further away, so it's picking up a bit more noise around me. But yeah, I've got the flow working for me, and Pluralsight seem to be happy with the audio quality. But I'd just like to get to that point that if I could get to the point where I can record raw audio and I do very little processing to it, because I do have to drop the background noise out a little bit at the moment as it stands. That'd be nice. So I think it's worth the money then, isn't it?
Your Pluralsight audio quality sounds good to me, and the content obviously as well. But
yeah, good. I changed the process last time. I think it was the course I did last time. I changed halfway through. I kind of found this. Well, I paid for that RX7 software, which was quite pricey. But I thought, okay, well, I tried the trial and it did do a really good job on the kind of cleanup. So I started using that, and then halfway through, I realized that the first half of the course recorded on the old flow, and I actually had to go and re-record an entire module of audio because it just sounded too different between the two versions because I couldn't get the original audio to kind of process the same way. I don't know what it was, but yeah, I've got it to a point that I'm happy now. So I've got another big checklist of things that I do at the start of recording and make sure that the gain's set to this, make sure this is turned on.
It's all really interesting, though, isn't it? I'm really enjoying what I'm learning by just playing around with it.
Yeah, I quite enjoy the whole sort of. It's a different set of creative tools, isn't it? Of kind of audio and video editing, that kind of thing.
Well, I quite like it with. I've not done much video editing, but last year we did the Azure Advent Calendar.
Oh yeah,
do you remember that? So a whole bunch of people put each day they released 3 videos that the community had done. So I did one on the CLI and using Azure CLI as well. And so that was my first experience in video editing.
yeah.
And then one thing I like about just like podcast editing is there's no video, so you can chop out audio without the jump in video.
Yeah, that's it. I've done a few of those YouTube videos where I've done like pieces to camera, and I really struggle to kind of, even though it's only a few sentences, it never seems to come out straight. So it takes me so long to get the whole thing filmed in one piece so that I don't have that editing issue with the visual. And yeah, I've always wondered like how some of these people do these long pieces to camera. I have been looking. I think for about £130, there's a little auto prompt teleprompt thing that you can get to put in front of a DSLR camera lens, so that you can have your script project off of your phone onto the lens, basically. So I might look at getting one of those because I think if I can just read it clearly, that will help. Because for some reason I forget stuff when I'm trying to do a piece to camera. I'm like, I script out what I want to say, and then halfway through I realize I haven't said bits of it that I need to say, and it's really frustrating. So yeah, video is a whole different beast, I think.
I can imagine. When you script it, are you scripting each word, or is it more bullet points, cue cards kind of thing?
Yeah, well, for Pluralsight, it's fully scripted. And then I kind of just do a whole kind of voiceover session in a go. For the video stuff, yeah, I did get to the point where it was more like, these are the things I want to hit on, because I could then stick those bullet points underneath the camera lens and kind of use them as a guide. So I think it's one of those skills that, doing presentation to camera, comes with time. I think you have to get used to it. A bit like speaking, I suppose, in sort of conferences and things. I never thought I'd get to that point where I'm happy doing it in front of hundreds of people.
I think that's it. I remember with the very first .NET Oxford intro talk I did, I was in the lead up. I wasn't nervous at all, but then when people started arriving, I was terrified. And I remember being on stage and just being hands in the pockets. I didn't forget what I wanted to say, but I was clearly nervous.
Yeah.
And then I got off, and Stuart Leeks. Do you know Stuart?
I think I met Stuart. Yeah,
He's might be doing an episode of this podcast quite soon on his new book, WSL2.
Oh, okay, yeah. I saw that go over Twitter actually. That he'd put that out. Yeah,
I'm halfway through it. Well, over halfway through now, and it's really good. Some good tips on it. But he he did our very first talk at .NET Oxford, and then he's just so energetic. He just has so much energy in his talks that when I got off, I just wanted to give it another go, and then it became addictive.
Yeah.
So the next few talks, I was obviously nervous, but then I'm finding the more I was doing it, the less nervous I became.
Mm. Yeah, I've definitely found that it is kind of conditioning, isn't it, really, and getting used to it and knowing that you can do it's half the battle. I think after you've done a few and you realize actually, I didn't die. No one threw things at me. People seem to like what I was talking about, and you realize actually, as long as you're up there and you've put a bit of background effort into it, and you're putting something coherent out to people, I think people are very happy, regardless of how you actually, if you're a Scott Hanselman and you're really bubbly and live and energetic and funny, or whether you're just kind of presenting it, a little bit more dryly. But people like it as long as you put the background research in and they're getting something from it.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone coming to these events is doing it in their own spare time. This is what I like about the DDD conferences. An upcoming episode of this, there's a few of us doing a talk about the DDD conferences.
Oh, I saw the chat on the on the Twitter thread. Yeah,
you're welcome to join if you like. That's one thing I like about the DDD conferences. They're Saturday, always free. So the kind of people that come are the people that are really interested, not the people that have been set by work.
Yeah, I think it's a different audience, isn't it? Of you've got the true passionate, like you say, self-learning, self-motivating kind of people that have just gone out and given up some of their free time to go to an all-day conference on a weekend. And yeah, I think 50% of a paid conference is work people that have been, you're going there. This is your learning and training budget. We're sending you here. You have to do it. You have to come back and tell us what you've learned as well. And so it's a bit of a tougher crowd, I think. And I remember the step from doing a few user group things to then going to like my first speak at my first conference. And I sort of that moment of realization where I was like, people have paid money for this event. So there's a whole level of extra pressure that you kind of feel like, oh, okay, how am I going to deliver the value that makes £1,000 conference ticket worthwhile for them, that kind of thing. But you realize, I think it's fundamentally the same content. You just need to be maybe a little bit more rehearsed with a conference than a user group, but otherwise it's it's the same kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've done a few DDD talks and obviously user groups, but I've never done a paid conference where attendees have actually paid. So I can imagine that takes it to the next level.
I think it's the next thing to kind of to get past. I think is just that realization. But I mean, all of my stuff has generally been practiced and rehearsed and a lot at home, and then I present it at user groups and get a little bit more of a refinement going. The user groups are really key, I think, because then you get to see originally you used to be able to get to see people's faces and get kind of a sort of judgment on, oh, did that bit land? Do they look confused now? You can kind of amend it based on that kind of feedback from the audience. But sadly, that's the thing I miss on remote conferences and things. At least with user groups, you tend to see a few people because people are a little bit more happy to have their webcams on and be on screen. But conferences, I mean, I did the NDC thing, and they didn't even allow people to turn their webcams on, so you're just talking to a picture of yourself basically, and it's quite hard to kind of judge, well, did they like that? Did they understand it? Do I need to kind of say it in a different way quickly just so that it's a bit clearer? You're just talking to a void.
Yeah, that's one thing I try and promote with .NET Oxford, try and get everyone to turn the webcams on, because even speakers, exactly like you just said, from the speaker's point of view, if they're talking to the wall behind them versus talking to, even if they can just see some faces on the second monitor, it's still better than nothing.
Yeah, a few nodding heads just as you're saying stuff really just helps encourage you that the content's landing and people are enjoying it.
Or if the speaker tries to throw in a joke, and just seeing that reaction, that people, it's not blank silence.
Yeah, I've been sort of trying to throw the odd joke into things that I do now a little bit more, just to kind of lighten the mood. But I don't want to do that on a remote event because you don't know whether they've liked it or not, really.
Well, I always enjoy the pub sessions afterwards, like the virtual at the moment, obviously, but it's the same faces that stick around afterwards. And it's not just about the talk; it's about lots of different things related to the stuff we're interested in. It's technology talk, but sometimes that conversation, afterwards in the pub, or when we're in physical events, like in lunch times and afterwards. Sometimes that's just as valuable as the talks themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have that time afterwards, don't you, where people, particularly if you go along as either a speaker or you go along and the speaker's there, if you've got questions that kind of come to you, like at an event, I can never think of the questions I want to ask. When they say, "Have you got any questions?" You're like, "No, I don't think I do." And then 5 minutes later, a bunch of questions flood into my brain. So if you go to the after event and you're able to go, "Actually, I do have a question," and you can kind of, just kind of get the answers at those things. So I enjoy those kind of things.
Yeah, and asking a question from the audience, you're not like chatting with the speaker, are you? You're not getting to know the speaker. At the pub afterwards, it's a conversation, so it's much more personal.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a level playing field as well, isn't it? In terms of you're not speaking up to that person that's on the stage, and not have got everyone listening in as well.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to know when we can go physical again. I don't think personally, I think I would, even post lockdown, would feel comfortable for quite some time yet.
No, I've got in the back of my mind that at best, I think it's going to be kind of summertime next year, really, before, I think we're going to need to get through the winter, see how things go, sort of March, April, and then see what happens. So fortunately, I've sort of got an agreement. Magix are more than happy to keep doing the events physically once we can. And I think a big part will be whatever they have as their COVID policies and their staffing policies. Before I can even think about it, they'll need to say that they're happy to have 40, 60 people in a building, in a close confined space, and it meets their health and safety and stuff. So see how long it takes for that to kind of get agreed as well.
Yeah, that's very good of them that you can still do your user group from their offices.
Yeah, I don't know quite how the logistics will work, because obviously previously I had a key to lock up and stuff afterwards. So I don't know whether I'll have to try and find someone that's the Magix employee that will always guarantee to be there, or whether they'll be happy to kind of like lend me a key for the day, let me lock it up and then post it back in or something. I don't know. We'll figure that out, but I'm sure it'll work. I mean, more than most events, I would say we had someone from Magix there other than myself. So it's usually going to be not too much of a problem, I guess, but just makes it a little trickier. And I don't know if I'm sure there's insurance things that they have to figure out. Like if you've got someone who's no longer staff in the building, do they need to be accompanied, that kind of thing. But we'll figure it out one way or the other.
Yeah, I remember when I came down to the Richard Campbell meetup, and you had all the sandwiches laid out on your desks.
Yeah,
and it's interesting in .NET Rocks where Richard, you can tell he's a storyteller, but he really is, isn't he? 'Cause he was just storytelling the whole way through the lunch break.
Yeah, he can sort of hold the head of a table wherever he is. I mean, I've been at quite a few conferences now where we've both been at the same event, so we've kind of ended up at speaker dinners and things in the evening, and he's always got fun stories and things to tell. Last summer about this, it must have been about a year ago. Rhiannon and I went out and stayed with him at his beach house over in Canada, and had a really nice time out there. It was really fun.
So is that how you've got into? I keep on seeing tweets from you about whiskey. Is that how that came about?
I was kind of getting into it a bit myself, but yeah, I must admit, sort of the sort of post speaker events now. I'll be like, "What are you drinking?" I'll try one of those kind of things. So I'll learn, but then you find out you've just paid £15 for a shot of whiskey, and you're like, "Oh, okay, that's that's going to hurt."
I do wish I liked whiskey. I've tried a few times because it sounds like it's something that'd be really interesting to be into, but every time I try it, it's like, oh no.
Yeah, it's definitely acquired taste. My wife doesn't like it if I pour a whiskey because she's like, "Oh, it smells, the room stinks."
Fantastic. Well, a massive thank you for joining us then.
No worries, thank you. Yeah, happy to do it again at any point in the future as well. If you like you say, once I've done Elastic for a couple of months, I'll probably part of my role will be a bit of kind of DevRel around the libraries and things as well. So probably have some fun stuff to talk about. I want to do a lot of perf stuff in their library as well, so I'll probably learn a lot more as I go.
That'd be very, very cool. Well, hopefully I'll see you on the 18th then, if as I say, I can get permission for having a second day.
Yeah, 2 in a row can be quite tricky. I've owed Shahid a talk for about a year, I think. We've been talking about it because actually I can't remember, I was at an event where Layla was at, I think it was one of the Techorama events, and Layla came up to me and she was like, I've been told to bother you while we're face to face about doing that meetup. So I don't know why I've just had so much trouble. Milton Keynes is far enough away that it's like for me to fit it in with the old job. It was like, it's going to be quite tricky to get the timings right for me to be able to go in person. So I suppose going remote's helped in that respect. And I guess same for you, being able to have people like Scott Hanselman and stuff come on.
I couldn't believe that. Like, I thought I may as well send him an email, see if he's up for it. He'd probably not reply, and he replied very quickly saying, "Yeah, I'm up for that."
Yeah,
and that was Hanselman. That was amazing.
Yeah, I tried to get him 2 or 3 years ago. I tried to get him to come down while he was at NDC London, and we got really, really close. And then I think he had a clash with some other event that he had to go to, or I think he was off to one of the universities or something, so he couldn't do it anymore. But I'll have to collar him again. But we got Scott Hunter, which was pretty cool. I mean, wouldn't normally expect to get Scott Hunter on a meetup. So I think it's opened the doors to being able to get different speakers in that like a local user group audience wouldn't normally see, I guess, which is nice.
Yeah, we almost had the two Scotts together, but it didn't quite work out. Well, we had Scott Hanselman was going to do 1 month, and unfortunately he did have to pull out, but then Scott Hunter said that he could do it in his place, which he did do. But then there was a point when Scott said, I might be able to make it now. So there was that small sliver. And then in the email conversation, we were saying, well, let's do an episode with 2 Scotts, and they were like really keen. But then Scott Hanselman couldn't make it, so they have both this year. They have both spoken at .NET Oxford, which is amazing given their profile. They must be so busy, and the fact that they've given up their own time. I think the time zone shift. Well, Scott Hanselman's talk was actually at his lunchtime, which is very nice of him.
Yeah, I was surprised with so Scott Hunter, because like I got sort of we chatted originally, and then he sort of passed me off to his like PA, I think, to organise the timings and get it all booked in. And she sort of said, I can give you 40 minutes on this day, or I can give you 30 minutes here, or I can give you 60 here. And I was like, well, let's go for the one that's 60, because that would be, better for talk time. She was like, yeah, he's got a thing before it, so he definitely won't be able to get there before the start time. And I was like, that's fine. I'll do the intro. I can do all of the other stuff, and then we can just join him in when he's there. And in the end, I think he joined like 15 minutes, like during our usual kind of chit chat. He was chatting to people. He did his session. He had to go because he went past his time, I think, anyway. He was just doing kind of Q&A. And he said, sorry, I've got to go. I've got another meeting. And then we were all doing our like post meetup chat. And then 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, he came back on and he said, my other meeting finished. I thought I'd come back in and just continue the conversation. I was like, wow, to go back in after he's kind of already escaped, I guess. It just shows that they are really interested in just having a conversation with people as well. And I guess they get a lot from it in terms of, they get feedback. They find out what people do and don't like about their decisions and what they're building. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we had, when was it? What month was it? October. We had Christos Matskas.
Yeah, I know the name.
Yeah, so he was talking about identity.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do know that.
I very first met him at one of the DDDs, speaking of those conferences earlier, and he was doing the lunchtime Grok talks.
Oh, yeah.
On Azure Functions, so that was quite a few years ago now. And then, so that's the very first time I saw him do a talk or met him. And yeah, since then he's spoken at .NET Oxford, both physically and in October virtually. And then, like you say, afterwards, he had to shoot, but then I was in the virtual pub session in Zoom, and I just said thank you on a Twitter DM to him, and I said, we're still in, by the way, and they go, I'm coming to that. So then he joined us, and then joined us for the virtual pub session. So he came back again.
Yeah, I think it's these people are, you forget that people are, they have just as much fun attending these things as we do, I guess, and getting to talk to everyone.
So a massive thank you, Steve, for joining us on the show. I'll include a link to all the stuff we talked about in the show notes. And hopefully, after you've been at Elastic for a bit longer, then we can get you back on again.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on.
No worries at all. Cheers to you.
Cheers.